representative from House District 65, which includes parts of Poland and Androscoggin County, and all of New Gloucester in Cumberland County. She's serving her third term in the Maine House, and her tireless efforts to improve the lives of those in her district and all across Maine have not gone unnoticed by her peers. She was recently elected to serve as the Assistant House Republican Leader in the 127th Legislature. She graduated from Cape Elizabeth High School and the University of Southern Maine, where she graduated with an associate's degree in business administration, and now lives in New Gloucester with her husband Steve and their 4 children. With her today is Ken Fredette. Ken Fredette is the minority leader of the House Republicans. He represents House District 100, which includes Corinna, Dixmont, and Etna, Newport, and Plymouth. Representative Fredette resides in Newport with his wife, Cindy. They have 2 children. Representative Fredette's education is extensive. He graduated valedictorian from East Grand High School. He earned a BS in accounting at the University of Maine in Mhpc. How many accountants do we have in the state legislature? That's a very good thing. I like people who can count with numbers. He has a master's degree in public policy and management with a concentration in government finance from USM's Edmund Muskie School for Public Service, and he has a JD from the University of Maine School of Law. He also earned a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. So you've been going to school for quite some time. Representative Fredette is also a member of the Maine Air National Guard and has served for 12 years as a Judge Advocate General. Wow. I think, given the timing this weekend, that is definitely worthy of applause. Currently an attorney in private practice, he's also taught at Eastern and Southern Maine community colleges. So without further ado, I would love to invite both Representative Ellie Espling and Ken Fredette up to give their presentation. Thank you.
Nice job. Thanks, Matt. And one of the things that when I was down at the Kennedy School, they have one of these signs up as you walk in, and it says "Leadership Matters." And I think it's very appropriate. I think particularly when you talk about Matt Gagnon and what we're doing here today, because Matt's entirely correct. Really, there's three pillars, I would call it, of what happens in Augusta. You have the environmental community, the Maine Municipal Association, and the unions. And those 3 organizations control an awful lot of the conversation of what happens up in Augusta, an awful lot. And it is tough on the Republican side, as Eric knows. We try to get people up there to testify, particularly on those issues that are important to Republicans and the cause. But it's tough to get them out, mostly because I think they're working. But it is tough to get people out there, and so the work that Matt does and that the Heritage Foundation does is really important. We reached out to Matt earlier on this session to talk to him and his staff about the budget. They gave us some great insights into where we should be going and what sort of conversations we should be having. And so we are really appreciative of the work that Matt's done, and we look forward to more of that in the future, Matt. I also want to just tell you a very quick story, because I think it's kind of relevant to the legislative process. I do live in Newport, which is roughly an hour and a half north of here, and so I did the 2-year program down in Cambridge at the Kennedy School, and so that was a full-time program that I was trying to do while I was trying to practice law, so it required a lot of driving. And so one night in particular, I was taking this class down there in leadership, and I was trying to think my way through it. And I just came through the Gardner toll booth, and I was speeding, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. It's Sunday night. I was going down to get ready for my classes Monday morning. The cop pulled me over, and the cop said, asked me 3 questions, and they were very informative to me after I got done, and I did not get a ticket, mind you. But he asked me 3 questions, and I actually talked about it in my leadership class the next day. The cop asked me the first question. He says, "Where are you going?" That's a really good question. If you're thinking about policy issues, where you're trying to take the state when you're talking about the budget, where are you going? What are you trying to achieve? Next, he asked me, "Were you paying attention?" And I wasn't. I'm sure I was on the phone and whatnot. And oftentimes up in Augusta, we lose the forest for the trees. I call it sort of the crypt. There's one, you get in that Capitol building, and you get there and you're all there all day long, right, Senator Cushing? And you're just there all day. And then the last thing the cop said to me when he didn't give me the ticket is, "Slow down." And so, where are you going? Were you paying attention? Slow down. And sometimes I think we as legislators need to go through that little exercise of, where is it we're really going? what are we trying to achieve, and then slow down and really try to think about where we're going. And so that's how I just want to start. Ellie, do you want to say anything?
Not really.
So let me talk then very quickly about where I think what has been important the last 4.5 years in Augusta, because I think that does talk about, you know, where are you going? You know, with the election of Paul LePage and the 125th of House and Senate Republicans, you know, we passed the largest tax cut in Maine history. That's a big deal. I served on the Appropriations Committee, the 125th. You know, we had to get a budget out of there with Democrats on board with that largest tax cut in Maine history, and that was a big deal. We did regulatory reform, you know, to make businesses more attractive, to be able to get stuff done easier. That was a big deal. We saved the state pension. You know, people don't realize it, but when the collapse of the stock market in 2008 had a very significant negative impact on our state pension system, because we have so much of our money invested in the stock market. And so we had to do some real reform on that system in order to keep it in its place and to preserve it. And we're not having conversations about it because of the work that we did in the 125th. In addition to that, we did many reforms over the last 4.5 years of the Department of Health and Human Services. You know, really looking into those programs and trying to get off this addiction to federal money. You know, they get out there and they say, look, you know, if you buy into this program the first 2 years, we're going to give you X amount of dollars, and then they start weaning you off it. And then the state dollars have to pick up those programs. And so I think it's important that we recognize that we did all of those things. And then last session, you know, the Democrats had control of the House and the Senate, and they pushed very hard to expand Medicaid, adding 70,000 new people to the Medicaid rolls. Now, many states throughout the country that have done that have seen significant explosions of their budget, largely because the federal government is starting to reduce those reimbursement rates to those states. And when you start doing that, that means you have to start cutting other programs to keep those people on the rolls. We took a very tough stand as Republicans in the legislature and the governor to say no to that. And I think by doing that and the issues on reforming welfare, Senate became Republican this last election. We picked up 43 new seats in the main House. So before we talk about the budget, I just want to, it does deserve a round of applause. But before we talk about the budget, I want to tell you about one last thing that I'm very, very excited about. Senator Cushing is very fortunate. He's here. Senator Cushing, if you can raise your hand. We are very, very fortunate in Augusta to have a Republican governor and a Republican Senate. There are 151 total members of the Maine House of Representatives. We have 68 Republicans. Now, the bad news is there's 77 Democrats. Okay? But I will tell you this, we have an opportunity in this next election to take the House. And if we can keep the Senate and take the House, I believe that we can change Maine for the next decade. We can do those things that Republicans started to do in the 125th but didn't get a chance to finish. Now, I'm just going to give you just a couple quick numbers on why I think this is possible. We have 68 Republicans in the House, and in Maine you can only serve 4 terms. We only have 2 people termed out. That means 68 can run again, and we already have 2 very good Republicans running in those 2 seats. So we could technically run 68 Republicans in this next election. The Democrats currently have 77. They have 14 members termed out. So that means that we are going to start with a numerical advantage that we typically don't have in an election cycle for the Maine House. Governor LePage, Susan Collins, Congressman Poliquin have all committed to putting what we need to do to get the House to become Republican, because we can then have a Republican agenda that we can work on the last 2 years of Governor LePage's term. I think that's really, really exciting. So, with that, I want to talk a little bit about the budget. And I talk about this, and I want to be careful that I say this at the very beginning. The comments that I make are based upon my observations of the process of where we're at as a former member of the Appropriations Committee and as the House Republican leader. I'm not here speaking on behalf of the governor. I'm not here speaking on behalf of the Senate. but I will give you my perspective on where we're at. So I think that's important for me to know that I'm not talking in that capacity. You agree, Ellie? No. Yes.
And I would also like to add that this is a process that's very fluid and ongoing, and what we present here today, the whole budget process is a moving target. So we're presenting what we know today, and what we are hoping for and what we have presented at the Capitol.
And I do want to note, just before we begin this, that in the Maine Senate, we have 3 Senate Republican leaders, and in the House we have 2 Republican leaders. Ellie is the only female Republican leader in the Maine legislature. I think that deserves a round of applause. So let's to begin to talk about really the conversation that Governor LePage has really started in the state about really his primary focus, which I think is really going to be the next 4 years, is really about eliminating the income tax here in the state of Maine. He's proposed a constitutional amendment. All the House Republican and the Senate Republican leaders were all sponsors of that constitutional amendment. Surprisingly, that came out of committee along a party line vote. The Democrats were not on board with that. But that's really where we're headed, where we want to go. My folks moved to New Hampshire about 25 years ago. They moved back to Maine since, but I will tell you, when they were down in New Hampshire doesn't have a sales tax, New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax. And their economy is pretty darn robust. So, I think we can get there. I think it's a laudable goal, and we have to focus on it. We have to be willing to do what it is that we can do. So the Democrats, in response to the governor's plan, just to start off, the governor's essentially, to sort of make this really simple, the governor has proposed significant income tax reductions. He proposes raising the sales tax from the current 5.5% to 6.5%, and also expanding those taxable goods and services in the state of Maine. That's sort of the 30-second version of the governor's tax proposal. But it's really driven by his goal to reduce the income tax. And I think the governor would make the argument that, the sales tax is a consumption tax. People choose whether or not to buy goods and services, and that's something that they can do. People, hardworking people, this keeps money in their pockets that they can decide to do with that money. The Democrats came out with their plan, which is called a better plan. And they have a pretty expansive list of items that they would like to expand the sales tax to. And many of you may not be able to see this, and so I'll just read it very quickly. They do have it. Okay, you do have it on your desk as well, on your table as well. But interior home decorating, cleaning, home cleaning, maintenance services, swimming pool cleaning, landscaping, lawyers. I'm a lawyer, we shouldn't be taxing lawyers. And it's just a lot of goods and services which you consume every day. Now, the Republicans have really said, hey, we're concerned that the person that's snow plowing your driveway, 10 times in the middle of the winter, do we want that person becoming a tax collector for the state of Maine? That's one of the concerns that we've had with the Democrats' proposal. And so in the proposal that we brought forward as Republicans, we've looked at how can we look at income tax reduction without so much of the expansion. For here even, you can go back one, Ellie. Recreation and amusement services, particularly they're looking at golfing and skiing as one of the ways that we can maybe look at expanding what we're taxing. But it's a tough conversation, and so not long ago, legislative Republicans came out with their own, what we call our own plan for trying to balance the budget, but also working towards the governor's goal of income tax reduction. And in the Republican plan, it provides essentially $380 million over the biennium. It also provides what we believe for continued economic growth, and also it has taxable earnings kicking in at a higher level in the state of Maine than what it is currently right now. And so part of that conversation is are we moving people off the tax rolls at the lower end, and where are they being taxed? And that is part of the conversation that needs to go on. The highest marginal tax bracket would kick in Maine at roughly $50,000, and I believe current law right now is that's $20,000. So if you think about that, the current law is if you make roughly $20,000 of adjusted gross income in Maine, you're going to be taxed in the highest tax bracket. You know, and that's really not a lot of money. So if you look at our plan, what it does is it takes, and this is a 2-year plan. If you have an income of $0 to $5,200 of adjusted gross income, now keep in mind adjusted gross income means that you're actually making more money. But by the time you take your standard deductions and whatnot, your actual adjusted gross income is at a lower level. From $0 to $5,200, zero income tax. From $5,201 to $50,000, the tax rate would drop in 2016 to 6.25%, and in 2017 it would drop to 5.95%. So that's a whole. Right now we are at 7.95, and so under the Republican plan, you would see a full 2-point percentage drop in taxable income for those in the $5,200 to $50,000. That's a lot of your middle class people. And so I think that's a big deal, because we're really trying to help those people out. Median income in Maine for 2-family households, roughly $45,000. So again, we're targeting those people. And then again, in the 50,000 plus adjusted gross income, and again, your adjusted gross income means you're probably making more realistically somewhere around 70,000. But by the time you take your exemptions and your deductions, if you're at 50,000 plus, that would drop to 6.75 in 16, and then 6.5 in 17. So, you know, that's a big deal, and it's a big change. It's a bold change, and so we think that that's really, really important. One of the things that I will tell you about where we're at, I think, in the current conversation of the budget negotiations, I don't think the Democrats are truly, really crazy about income tax reduction. Believe it or not. And, you know, I believe, and I will predict in the next 10 days, the real battle in Augusta over this budget is going to be over the question of whether or not there are going to be income tax reduction in this budget, and if so, how much.
And I just want to add that if you look at the Democrats' plan, they have actually expanded the brackets so there would be more brackets with higher income tax rates. So just so you have that comparison as well.
And that's a good point, Ellie, that they do have more brackets, and they call it, that's a progressive plan. But they quite frankly, what they want to do is really tax those people at the highest end at the highest rate. And that's sort of the Democrats' theory. But if you think about the conversation of 13 people on a committee, you know, Democrats and Republicans trying to come up with a budget, you know, and normally, most every recommendation out of the Appropriations Committee will come out unanimous. And it's been that way for, you know, a lot of years. And so you're asking 13 people they'll be working this weekend, I'll be in Augusta this weekend, trying to come together on a budget. And I think it's really important, I think it should be our top priority, that we have income tax cuts in this budget. And that is going to be a real fight, in my opinion. It shouldn't be, but I think it's going to be. Itemized deductions. Under the governor's proposal, he actually takes and eliminates itemized deductions, but he does have a credit that he has in his proposal to offset that. But Republicans thought that it was important in their proposal to recognize the importance in the housing industry and for, you know, those younger couples that are buying a home to be able to take the deduction, you know, for home mortgage interest. And we also think it's important for those people who like to contribute and donate to charities at a significantly high level, that they be able to take those deductions as well. And for those that have, a sickness or an illness, that have high medical expenses, we also think that those people ought to be able to take those deductions. And so the Republican legislative proposal provides for keeping itemized deductions in the budget, so that we are recognizing those important policy considerations in the plan. The governor's, again, proposal to eliminate those does have an offset in the credit, but again, I think that those policy considerations are truly important. I think even, Newport has seen a little bit of a resurgence of the sales of homes. Certainly you're seeing it down here in Cumberland and York counties. And, taking away the ability to deduct home mortgage deductions, I think would not be helpful to the housing economy, where a lot of people have investments and equity in their homes. The House and Senate Republican plan also, under the governor's proposal, he eliminated revenue sharing in the second year of his budget. So we're working on a 2-year budget up there. He did fund it at the first year at $62 million, and then eliminated it the second year. There's been a lot of conversation around the state and in the media about the revenue sharing and how important it is, at least from the municipal perspective, that does help to keep down property taxes. And so in the Republican legislative proposal, we fund revenue sharing in the second year at $64 million. And so we do depart from the governor in terms of that part of it, because we recognize the importance of property taxes and how that fits into the role of the financing scheme here in Maine. Also, we have in Maine what's called the homestead exemption. Now, most of you probably have this on your town municipal tax when you get your tax. A lot of people don't even realize it, because once they fill that form out, it's just there every year. The governor does eliminate the homestead exemption in his proposal, but the Democrats double theirs from $10,000 to $20,000. And in the House and Senate Republican plan, we keep the homestead exemption where it's at right now at $10,000. So sort of no change there. But again, with the municipal, with the revenue sharing piece and the homestead exemption piece, we think from the House Republican and Senate plan that we're recognizing the importance of property taxes for people here in Maine, particularly those in the middle class.